Welcome to the Achieve Results Now podcast, the podcast that gives you immediate actions you can take to start seeing life-shifting results now. Hey everybody, welcome to the Achieve Results Now podcast. This is Mark Cardone.
And Theron Feidt.
Back into our second episode of our Refocus to Rise series. So we're talking
Yes.
about things we can do, yes, leading up to, starting for a great 2026, but really
hmm
anytime you need a reset, you can come back to these episodes and listen to a couple of them to kind of get your stuff right. Today, we're focused on our bodies and energy
Yes.
specifically.
Yeah, for sure. And I think what we're going to come across with is these tips and action steps are something that are realistic to do, realistic that if you do them consistently, they're going to make a big difference. You're going to see a
Yeah.
difference. Now, that doesn't mean the big difference is going to be tomorrow, although it could be depending on where you're at. But it's a little bit different than you might think, what we're going to talk about. And so I hope you listen and then share it.
Yeah, and I think, health is such a funny topic, because I think there's so many fads, there's so many things, there's so many different messages in the world, about what is health. And I think,
hmm
one of the cool things is we're not really even talking about health. We're talking about our energy,
Yeah.
and I think
Yep.
at the end of the day, as much like it's important to have, muscle mass, it's important to be, a healthy body weight. Like all those things are important, the things that like your doctor tells you are
hmm
important. But,
Right.
at the end of the day, really like how we register that
Right.
is like, did we have enough energy to do the things that we wanted to do that were important
hmm
that day? Can
Right.
we play ball with our kids? Can we, stay up late enough to,
Yep.
have a long day and have a conversation with our spouse? Like, how do
Right.
we feel?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And that's the big thing because energy is what is going to either help you towards your goals or make you not achieve them because you don't have the energy, the will, the drive to do it. I mean, think of any time you're fatigued, you're hungry. Oftentimes people that are experiencing that are also grumpy, so your mood is bad. But what is your motivation like when you're tired, when you're
Yeah.
hungry? It's not good, right? So these tips are going to help you be more consistent because that's the key. The key to energy is you want energy when you need it. You want energy consistently. So it's not like I have energy once a week. That's not good. You really ultimately want to have energy 7 days a week, or at
Yeah.
least six.
I have a ton of energy on Friday, but the rest of the week is just a
Yeah.
blur, right?
Yeah, and
Um,
sometimes it's mental.
yeah.
Certainly, like when you brought up Friday, if that's your last day of work for the week, that does, or if you're ready to go on vacation, the last day before your vacation starts is usually the most productive day you had all year. Why is that? It's not that you had more time, it's that you were more focused and you're more energetic because you're mentally excited about something else. And it didn't have a lot to do with your body necessarily. So, what we're going to talk about is something that's not just for the mental, because mental can obviously help you increase your energy. What we're really talking about is what you physically you can do to make it better. So it's real.
100%. So let's get into the first one because I think, we just like real briefly touched on this, but
Yep.
step one is about auditing your energy, not your weight.
Yep.
And I really like this one because I think if you went up to somebody and you said, "Hey, what do you weigh?" Unless somebody has like recently been on a scale or kind of has a rough idea, like they wouldn't really have quick access to that,
Yep.
right? It's not something that like I couldn't tell you what I weigh right now unless I had recently this morning stepped on
Yeah.
a scale.
Sure.
But if you say, "How's your energy right now?" Like I know that I live in it right now and I can tell you what my energy is. So I think the fact that we put so much attention on the scale and we kind of skip over that I have a lot of energy today is backwards. We really need to focus on the
Yeah.
energy component.
Yeah, for sure. And weight is not the whole issue either. Not that it of course it matters. If
Yeah,
you're obese, that will have an effect on your energy and your overall health, of course. But if you are, let's say you're a bodybuilder, by the scale from your doctor, most bodybuilders are obese because
yeah,
they weigh too much for their height. Well, if you look at them, they're at like 5% body fat,
yeah,
something ridiculous like that. And so they're definitely not overweight, but they are because of their muscle mass. So, and I'm not saying that's like for the average person, but oftentimes we do focus so much on weight.
Yeah.
And we don't realize that if we're working out, we're especially if we're in a routine of toning and building muscle, and you're replacing that fat with muscle, your weight might not go down at all. In fact, it might increase a little bit, but your body looks better. But more importantly than that, like we're talking about, your energy is better.
Yeah. And one of the things we've said in the podcast before is if you can't measure it, you can't manage it, right?
Right.
And I think, the great thing about energy is it's really kind of a sliding scale. Like, do I feel alert? Do I feel sharp? And I think one of the best things we can do is kind of start tracking that data.
Hmm.
So like if you feel low energy, grab a notebook, pull it out, write down the time of day when you feel low energy. Do it for like a week, because you might find, hey, it's only after like one specific meal of the day throughout the
Yep.
week that I feel this way. Maybe it's at like 11 a.m. every day, because I'm not eating breakfast or I'm not drinking
Right.
enough water. And,
Right.
so I think there's really a lot of value in just keeping a real simple log in your phone
Hmm.
or in a notebook of like periodically throughout the day, how am I feeling? How's my energy
Yep.
level?
Yep. Now, once you have that, you want to look for cause and effect. So you look at your notes, you look at that notebook, you look at that log that you've done, and I don't think one day is enough. I think,
No.
like what you said, do it for at least a week, and not that you can't look at, day to day, but you want to do it at least for a full week or more if you can do it. And then what's the cause and effect? So is this something you ate? Is this something you didn't eat? Oftentimes it's not like if you're fasting and you don't eat breakfast, you can still have energy, right? It's usually what you eat. Like
Yeah.
if you stop at to get coffee and a donut, and then all of a sudden, man, at 10:30, I'm like wiped. Well, that's because you ate that sugary donut,
Yeah.
and it's just your energy just crashed because of that. And then you take more coffee for the caffeine, and that's not a good routine.
Yeah.
That is not a good routine. So it's important that log that you take a look at it, and by measuring that energy and looking back to what you ate or what you did or what you didn't eat, it can give you that cause and effect.
Yeah. And it's interesting, like not only food, but moving, right? Like, I
Yep.
mean, I think, some people, they wake up and they kind of lay there for an hour and a
Yep.
half scrolling their phone and their blood kind
Right.
of coagulates there. And,
Coagulates. Yeah.
when your blood's not moving, you have, like that's
Yeah.
what gives you energy. So, so I think one of the things you can do is make small tweaks.
Yep. Hmm.
We've talked about levers before and how,
Yeah.
you don't want to move too many levers at once.
Right.
But if you look at that log and you look at kind of your causes and effects, and then you just say, here's one thing I should try. Maybe it's walking 10 minutes in the morning. Maybe it's, trying something different for breakfast. Maybe it's,
Right.
skipping the donut and having, you know, a handful of nuts and whatever,
Right.
right? So I think there's those little tweaks we can do, but just make one tweak and see how it impacts your energy throughout the next week.
Right. For sure. Yep. Great tip. So that goes into step number two, which is move with purpose, not pressure.
Mhm.
And the first part of that, the first bullet I want to talk about is define your non-negotiable minimums. So, what's your minimum you're going to do every day for your movement? So, is it a 20-minute walk? You're going to walk 20 minutes. Now, maybe it's 10 minutes here and 10 minutes later. That's fine. It still goes up to your 20-minute minimum. Maybe you're going to do this many squats or this many push-ups each day. And by setting a minimum, oftentimes what happens is you end up doing a little bit more, especially as the weeks go on. So the first week, maybe it's a good minimum. And then the next week, maybe you rise and raise that minimum up a little bit more, and that would be obviously great to do as well.
Yeah, no, I think that's good. And then, one of the things you can do is you can also start to add habits, to things you're already doing. And
Hmm.
I think like we talk about habit stacking when we talk about habits all the time.
Yeah.
And I think it's easy, if you pick something that you do that takes some time, right? I mean,
Hmm.
we all do things during the day. Maybe it's like warming up something in the microwave. Maybe it's making a pot of coffee. Maybe it's, taking a walk with the dogs or whatever it is.
Yeah.
We do things that take time. And if you said, well, geez, during that 8 minutes I'm waiting for my coffee to brew, or that, 4 minutes I'm waiting at the microwave, maybe I can pop in 20 squats.
Right.
Maybe I can do some quick movement. Maybe I can
Hmm.
do some push-ups. I know, it's funny. I remember one of the habits I had when I started drinking a lot more water. One of the habits I adopted by force was going to the bathroom more
Yeah.
often.
Yeah.
And I remember I said every time I like hit the restroom, I'm going to mentally stop and do like 10 or 20 squats just to,
Right. Yeah.
remind myself. So I think habit stacking is a really important thing to do.
Yep. And then to cap this one off is you want to celebrate the doing, not the results.
Yeah.
And I think this is super important when you're dealing with anything with your body, because depending on what stage of life you are, male or female, there's going to be and just your overall genetics.
Yeah.
Everybody's going to be different with the results to show. Okay, but it's really that's why we started this podcast with the body talking about your energy level. How do you feel versus your weight,
Yeah.
your body fat percentage, all of those things, which are okay to measure. There's nothing wrong with that. But certainly as you get older, it's and really younger, I would argue, but definitely when you're older, the energy is what matters. How
Yeah.
are you useful? Can you get things done throughout the day? And so by celebrating, hey, listen, I feel so much better. I don't look better yet, but I feel better. Maybe it's going to take you 3 months to show results where somebody else only takes 1 month, and your genetics are different. So again, thinking about celebrating your action of doing things, that you stuck with a plan, that you made progress of being consistent with it. That's what you should be celebrating.
There's so much power in that, in just being able to say, I said I was going to do this and I did it.
Hmm.
And I think we do get so hung up on the result. We get so hung
Right.
up on the what does the scale say? How do
Right.
I look in the mirror? I
Hmm.
mean, if you think walking 30 minutes a day for a week is going to make you look better in the mirror,
Yeah.
it's probably for a week is not going to work, right?
Yeah.
It's a long game. So I think
Yeah.
celebrate
Eventually it will, but right. It's not
eventually
going
it
to
will.
happen in a week.
But yeah, but 1 week's not going to do it, right?
Right.
2 weeks, maybe a little better. A month,
Hmm.
definitely some results. But I think staying consistent, you're always going to feel better when you're moving.
Yep.
Now, the opposite of moving is talking about engineering our recovery,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
Because I think people think, well, geez, if I move a lot, I'm going to be exhausted at the end of the day.
Hmm.
Which isn't really, usually isn't the case. Like it's good if at the end of the day you're kind of like, hey, I achieved, I
Hmm.
did, I'm tired. Um, but it's not necessarily about working more. It's really about just getting better at that recovery portion of what we're trying to do.
Right. When people start, especially lifting weights, but any workout because it's dealing with muscles, but specifically if you're working on your body lifting weights, what people don't realize is the recovery, and what you do with the recovery, the rest, and obviously the nutrition is what's going to build your muscles, because when you're working out you're tearing your muscles down. There's no building of muscles when you're working out. It's tearing down. So the recovery is when the magic happens. So this is talking about making sure that you have a good planned recovery. What's your ritual for recovery, making sure that it's specific, like after workout stretching for even 5 minutes after is a great ritual. Not only will it bring your heart rate down a little more gradually than just stopping, just like on the run. How often do we tell kids keep walking after they're done? They do a
Right.
timed run and you see kids stop and put their hands on their knees. And you're like, now a kid, it's not a lot's going to happen to a child, but an adult, it could be not so good, right? You could seize up.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
Um, but you want to teach that habit of keep the movement going. So if you have a ritual of from a run to a walk for 5 minutes, or after your workout, you do 5 to 7 minutes of stretching. That ritual, that bringing that down, that's not the recovery yet, but that's the recovery specifically of the workout that you just did. It can be very helpful.
Yeah, and scheduling something like that and making sure that you don't forget. Because
Yep.
I really think most people when they don't follow through with stuff. I mean, especially if you're here and you're listening to this podcast, I feel like you're the kind of person who wants to improve, but
Right.
you're also busy. And
Yep.
sometimes at the end of the day, you just go, "Oh man, I totally forgot to do that."
Hmm.
That stretch I wanted to do, and so I
Right.
think there's a ton of value in putting it in
Hmm.
your calendar if you can. I set my alarm clock. so that like right around 9:15, I get that reminder where it buzzes and I go, oh yeah, this is time for me to start,
Yeah.
put my phone aside,
Yeah.
grab a book, stretch, talk to the kids, do all the stuff. You know what I mean?
Right.
So I think scheduling your wind down and making sure it's locked in so you don't really just so you don't forget about it is important.
Yeah. And the last part, the last bullet of this step is your quality of sleep. Now, if somebody tells you this is as much sleep as you need, they don't know what they're talking about because everyone is different.
Yeah.
I've known very successful people with unbelievable energy that go on 4.5 to 5 hours of sleep. That's all they need. And that's for years and years and years, not just for a week, but years and years and years, right? I know other people, they need a full 8 hours, maybe even 8.5. You have to figure out what works for you. Now, and I'm not talking a teenager or a child because they need a lot of extra sleep. They need way more sleep. Their body is growing and building. I'm talking as an adult, you have to figure out what works for you.
Yeah.
I know for me, 6.5 hours, even six is really good. I don't need eight. Do I like eight sometimes? Sure, but I don't need it. And
Yeah.
and and that's I know that after all these years of doing it and being consistent with your time you go to bed and the time you wake up, the more consistent you can be with that, the better your recovery, the better your sleep is going to be, and the rituals leading up, like you mentioned earlier, leading up to that, the wind down rituals leading up to the sleep is key as well.
Well, it's interesting because I think, like if your body knows you go to bed at 10:30 every day and you wake up at 6 o'clock every day or 5 o'clock every day or whatever it is, your body's going to learn to, I mean, just like your metabolism works with meals, like if you're
Yeah.
eating, at specified times, your body starts to process the food differently. I mean, really similar with sleep. Like if your body knows here's the hours we're allotted for
Hmm.
sleep, it's
Right.
going to sleep more efficiently during those
Right.
hours, right? So, but I think it's important to think, needing 8 hours of sleep is not a weakness for achievers because I think
No, 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 not at all.
people wear 4 hours of sleep as a badge of honor sometimes. And, like, look, if that's what your body needs, that's awesome, right? If your body needs 4 hours of sleep and an hour power nap, that's great.
Right.
If you
Yep.
need 2, 3 hours, like whatever it is, but we want to make sure that it's quality, right? That
Hmm.
that we're sleeping somewhere where it's quiet, it's dark, we're not being interrupted, throughout the night so our body can do the recovery it wants. I think that's really important. Um, but also, make sure you listen to yourself. If you're exhausted, when you wake up and you're throughout
Right.
the day, maybe you need to try one more hour.
Right.
Don't discount it.
Yeah, but oftentimes it's the quality of your sleep. So it's not necessarily that you need more time, you
Right.
need better quality. And so nowadays, especially, it's so easy to track your sleep, whether you use a smartwatch to do it. They have smart rings. I mean, I think they even have mattresses that will tell you now, I think it's worth investing in one of those. Probably the smart ring is probably the cheapest thing to invest in. I'm not sure how much they are, but I mean, just doing that for a while and really seeing how much REM sleep you're getting, how deep you're sleeping can make a world of difference. So you can sometimes even shrink the length of time that you sleep because your
Yeah.
quality is so much better.
Yeah. I remember my first night with an Apple Watch. Joyce woke up and she came downstairs and said, "Hey, how'd you sleep?" And I read her the stats of how I slept, and she said, "I'm not going to ask you anymore if you're going to do that." I was like, "Well, I got 2 hours of REM sleep, and I got and
She was just being like nice
she was
and
right,
just like, hey, how'd you sleep? And usually the response is, oh,
good."
I slept good or I didn't sleep so well. And that's it. It's not like a full rundown of
I
my
was like,
REM was this much. And
I'm glad you asked. I was in deep recovery sleep for 4 hours, and then and she's like, "Yeah, I'm not going to ask." That's a like, it's too early in the morning for that. So once you get your watch, don't answer questions like that. That's obnoxious. But anyway, so let's go through a review. So I think that this is really I love talking about health as it relates to energy because I just think that's such an important part. We need
Mhm.
energy to achieve our goals. But number one, start by auditing your energy, not your weight, right? And this really
Yep.
becomes like we're so focused on how much weight are we losing, how much, where are we? Healthy weight's important, but
Mhm.
really keep the data on how you're feeling throughout the day. It's really
Right.
important. Write it in a notebook, find that cause effect relationship if you can, and then just try to make that one little tweak to make it better.
Yep. And then step two is move with purpose, not pressure. And this is talking about having non-negotiable minimums of what you're going to do, your workouts, your walks, your different things like that. Habit stacking is in there, so try to combine a couple habits at a time, so that way it's saving you time. And then the last one is make sure you're celebrating staying consistent with what you're doing versus just celebrating results, because oftentimes the results are slow.
Yeah. And then the last one, we're really talking about sleep, energy, and recovery,
Hmm.
and making sure that we're creating like that shutdown ritual that really gets our body relaxed at the end of the
Right.
day, doing those things that are important so we wind down. Make sure we schedule it so we don't forget, because it's the end of the day. It's easy to get caught up in all the other things and forget to take care of ourselves. And then really prioritizing the quality of our sleep, and making sure it's dark, make sure it's quiet, trying to
Hmm.
really maximize the rest and recovery our body can do during that time. Rest is not a lazy thing. You need it to recover.
Right.
So
Right. Yep.
um, that wraps up this episode of the Achieve Results Now podcast. Hopefully, you're going to do some of this. It's going to give you a lot more energy as we go into our
Yes.
goals and our results and all our stuff. Share this with somebody who tells you they don't need they can't talk until they get their coffee in the morning.
Right.
Those people need more energy, and
Yeah.
we will see you on the next episode.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for listening. Hop over to our website at www.achieveresultsnow.com to get your free copy of our book, Ignite Results, 4 specific daily actions to help you achieve results now. You can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/Achieve Results Now. Thanks for listening, commenting, and subscribing. Now get out there and achieve results now.